It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
You know, I spend a lot of time online debating with atheists a lot, you know, on some of my videos on YouTube and stuff, and I get a lot of feedback, especially when I'm talking about atheists. You know, one of the funny things to me is that, you know, I can never understand this, like, atheists are so firm in their stance that there's no God, and I'm just like, how could you possibly know that there's no God? Like, how could you even know that? Like, did nothing come down and tell you that that's what started the earth? Like, I can understand a believer like myself. You know, I've actually had an experience where, you know, God revealed himself to me. And I don't never use this in debates or when I'm talking about God, because I know no one's going to, you know, take that as evidence. And people will find excuses in their own mind for something whenever somebody tells them an experience that they had, no matter how real they know it is to themselves. If you tell your experience to somebody else, they're going to find a way to debunk it in their own mind, because they don't want to believe it. And so they'll find excuses and they'll search their mind instead of believing you. And when I first became a believer, I used to think, like, I'm the type of person, I'm very realistic and I'm real upfront. So I kind of thought, like, when God did reveal himself to me, I kind of thought, like, oh, everybody's going to believe me, like, because they know I don't play around about this type of stuff. Like, I never believed in God, so they know but sure enough, when I started telling people, I could just see the doubt in their face, and I could see them coming with the string of excuses in their mind of why I had to be mistaken some kind of way. But, you know, even if evolution is true, which is not, and even if the Bible has errors in it, which it doesn't, even if it did, let's just say evolution was true, that still doesn't disprove God. God could have been behind evolution. You know, there's no such thing as proof against God. There's no such thing. I mean, just because, let's say, germs or whatever just started morphing on their own and becoming life, who's to say that God wasn't behind the germs? Who's to say God didn't make the germs and it would still make sense? It still wouldn't make sense for the planet to come out of nothing without the nothing itself being created, because nothing is definitely not nothing. They say it was a dot or it was a fluctuation of space and matter moving around. So I mean, who's to say God wasn't behind that? Like, there's no such thing as proof against God. That's, you know, completely false. If somebody tells you that there's proof that there's no God, there's no such thing as that. But, you know, if people don't want to use philosophy and logic to understand that there had to be some kind of intelligence inside of a universe that's completely relying on intelligence. Also, here's another thing that maybe you've heard of, maybe not. It's called Pascal's wager. And Pascal's wager is just a way of looking at God through another angle. And this is the fact that if God isn't real, guess what? If you put your faith in him and you die, you'll never even know. You'll die and there won't be any loss. But if God is real, then you will end up spending eternity in hell. Eternity being tortured, suffering, because you didn't want to give it a shot. So the safe thing to do in this wager would be to try your best to believe in God. If you're torn in between belief and non-belief, the safe and smart thing to do, because there's so much in the balance, your eternity is in the balance. The smart thing to do would be to try your best to believe, to study the Bible, to practice the faith, even if you're not fully believing it. That would be the safe thing to do, because it wouldn't be worth your eternity. A lot of people say stuff like, oh, well, God wouldn't send people to hell if he's loving and all this and all that. Well, I'll tell you one thing right now. The biggest mistake most people do is they think that God thinks like them, and he doesn't. His ways are far over ours. And people also think that, oh, well, there's a God, but, you know, he's not the God of the Bible. Like, he doesn't know how to communicate with us. Or, you know, so how convenient is that? You know, there's a God, but he can't tell us anything to do. Like, that's, you know, it's wishful thinking. And people, you know, and that's a created God, and that's one of the first laws and the commandments is to not create your own God. And that's what a lot of people do. They create their own God, some loving God that thinks just like them and won't send anybody to hell. But if there's no hell, what happens to Hitler? What happens to all the people that kidnap babies and murder them? Do you want them to go to heaven too? There has to be a heaven, there has to be a hell. And everybody likes to put themselves in the box of the good people and put everybody else in the box of the bad people. But it doesn't work like that. We're all sinners and we all need saving. Only through Jesus can this happen. He is the only way. Something to think about.
Do take good care of yourself.